What makes you feel peaceful?
Maybe it's music. Maybe it's a little creek. Maybe it's the ocean. Think of a place that brings you peace.
Here's my peaceful place. If only I could be filming this video from there today.
Do you feel more peaceful now? The Old Testament is about God's people, and they weren't always at peace with God. God told Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Then Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob, and Jacob was renamed to Israel, and he had Joseph.
And Joseph, Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham were part of Jesus' family tree.
But back to Joseph. Joseph had a very unpeaceful young adulthood. His brothers sold him into slavery. Then he was bought and jailed for something he didn't even do. And while he was in jail, he helped people understand their dreams. Eventually, he ended up helping Pharaoh understand his dreams. And then he became second in charge of the country of Egypt. He was like vice Pharaoh. I think we can say that God was with him.
Do you remember that story? God's chosen people ended up in Egypt during a famine, and God saved them. But then those people died, and the new pharaohs didn't remember Joseph and were afraid that God's chosen people would rebel and become stronger. So the pharaoh enslaved the people and ordered that the baby boys be killed. Pharaoh was not a man of peace. God had a plan, and he rescued baby Moses so that he grew up to lead God's people out of Egypt.
Exodus is the second book of the Bible, and it tells about this exit from slavery to the promised land. In Exodus 3, verses 7 and 8, God says this to Moses.
Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. That sounds yummy and peaceful.
I think it sounds sticky.
This passage of scripture gave Moses hope that God was listening and peace that God was in control. God's people needed to be rescued, and God had a plan.
The immediate need was to be rescued from slavery and harsh living conditions. God followed through with his promise, and his people were freed from Pharaoh's rule.
God had an even bigger plan for rescue. He had the plan to rescue all people from sin, and that is why he sent his son, Jesus.
About 700 years before Jesus was even born, God instructed a prophet named Isaiah to tell his people about his plan. A prophet was someone chosen by God to speak for him.
Isaiah 9, 6, and 7 says this, For a child is born to us, a son is given to us, the government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of Heaven's armies will make this happen.
Who do you think this passage is about?
It's about Jesus.
Isaiah also prophesied about how Jesus would be born to a young woman and named Emmanuel, which means God is with us. And Micah prophesied that he would be born in Bethlehem. Jesus was a descendant of Abraham, and that was talked about way back in the book of Genesis in chapter 17.
The more you learn about the Bible, the more you realize that it's all one very connected book about God's plan to save his people. His plan was to send his son Jesus, who would be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace.
Those words are really catchy. I feel like they would make a good song.
Those important words were first spoken by Isaiah long before Jesus' birth, and they came true. God's promises are true. He wants us to be without conflict and have freedom from our worries and fears. He's the God of peace. He can help us feel that in our hearts when we believe in Him and trust Him. Jesus is the Prince of Peace.